I pulled into my in-laws' driveway with sunscreen already on my arms and a bag packed in the back seat. The car smelled faintly of coconut lotion and road dust. My playlist was queued with vacation songs, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of excitement. This was supposed to be the family trip, the one they had mentioned for weeks, maybe even months. Every time someone brought up summer plans, Hawaii, sunshine, a rented villa where we could finally, maybe, act like a family. I parked by the curb, turned off the engine, and looked at the house. The lights inside were warm, glowing against the late evening sky. Through the window, I could see luggage stacked neatly by the stairs. Sun hats, a cooler, passports lined up on the hallway table, like props for a commercial. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel for a moment, whispering to myself, "This is it." Finally, I grabbed my bag, swung it over my shoulder, and walked up to the front door. My flip-flops slapped softly against the concrete. I knocked twice, light but certain. A pause. Then the door opened. My mother-in-law stood there, not surprised, not welcoming, just mildly inconvenienced, like I was the Amazon delivery guy dropping off a package she didn't remember ordering. Her hair was freshly curled, her lips painted in a deep shade of coral. She looked straight at me, her hand resting on the edge of the door, and said it. "You were never invited. We figured you'd be fine alone." Her tone was casual, but the words hit like a glass of ice water dumped over my chest. For a second, I didn't process them. My smile froze, my breath stuck halfway in my throat. Behind her, I could hear Sarah, my sister-in-law, laughing at something on her phone. My father-in-law stood in the kitchen, facing the counter like he was stirring something invisible. Not one of them turned around. I let the silence hang for a moment. My bag slid slightly down my shoulder. My heart thudded so loud it drowned out the laughter inside. But my face was calm. I smiled, small and sharp. "Sure," I said. Just that one word, light as a feather, but it tasted like blood in my mouth. She blinked once, then turned away, leaving the door open just enough for me to see the rows of suitcases waiting. 4 of them, none of them mine. I stood there with the bag digging into my shoulder, listening to the muffled chatter behind her, the kind of chatter people make when they know something you don't. When the plan has been set for weeks, and you are the only one who didn't get the memo. I placed my bag down slowly on the porch. The zipper rattled as it hit the ground, a tiny metallic sound that felt louder than thunder. My fingers itched for my phone. I slipped it from my pocket and felt the familiar glass screen against my palm. I didn't open it yet. I just held it, like a weapon, like a secret. "Have a good trip," I whispered, though she had already turned back inside. My words floated into the doorway, unanswered, ignored. Walking back to my car, I could feel the heat of humiliation spreading across my skin, hotter than the summer sun. The neighbor's sprinklers hissed in the distance, the air smelled faintly of cut grass, and yet I felt like I was standing in a vacuum. Every sound was sharp, every movement magnified. My flip-flops scraped the driveway, as if announcing to the whole street that I was leaving alone. I slid into the driver's seat and shut the door. The silence inside the car wrapped around me. My reflection stared back from the dark screen of the dashboard, eyes wide, mouth a tight line. I wanted to scream, to throw the bag into the street, to pound on the door and demand they admit what they were doing, but I didn't. Instead, I reached for my phone again. My thumb hovered over the airline app I had bookmarked days ago. Not because I expected to need it, just because I like being prepared. A habit from years of being left out and having to find my own way home. I tapped it open. Flight numbers, departure times, the exact route they were taking. I knew it because I had been the one to research them weeks earlier. Back when I still believed I was part of this family trip, my chest tightened as I scrolled. The same flight still had seats available, the same gate, same departure time. I could already picture it. Them boarding, smug and sure, and me walking up right behind them with my own ticket. I didn't buy the same villa. Number. That would have been too easy. Too predictable. Instead, I booked a private suite at a resort 5 miles away, perched directly on the ocean, with its own balcony and a view that swallowed the horizon. And just to twist the knife, I reserved it under their last name, Miller. The confirmation email sparkled on my screen like a small rebellion wrapped in digital ink. As the app refreshed, I added a note to the reservation. The Miller family prefers early check-in and a bottle of champagne on arrival. I hit confirm and leaned back against the seat, exhaling slowly. The humiliation still burned, but beneath it, something else stirred. Control. The house door closed behind me. I could see their silhouettes moving through the curtains, shadows laughing, bags being zipped, passports tucked into pockets. For the first time, I didn't feel like the outsider begging to be let in. I felt like the one holding the real ticket. I started the engine, the playlist still cued, cheerful as if mocking me. I switched it off. The silence was better, cleaner. I adjusted the mirror, caught one last glimpse of the house shrinking behind me, and drove away. I didn't know it then, but this was only the first act. The real scene would play out days later, in a hotel lobby in Hawaii, when my mother-in-law would look up from the check-in desk and see me standing there, smiling, holding a room key with her own last name printed on it. For now, I drove with the window down, the warm wind tangling my hair, my phone buzzing with the sound of a new confirmation email. My bag lay heavy in the back seat, but my chest felt lighter. I whispered again, this time only to myself, "Have a good trip." And I meant it, because I already knew mine was going to be better. The week before the trip, I tried to convince myself everything would be fine. I told my coworkers I was finally taking time off. I folded swimsuits into neat little piles and tucked sunscreen bottles into zip bags. I even bought a new paperback for the flight, something light-hearted that I imagined reading while the ocean breeze slipped through the villa windows. On the surface, I played the role of the eager daughter-in-law. Inside, I kept replaying all the small signs that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't going to go the way I hoped. It had started with the group chat. They called it Family Trip 2025 and added everyone except me at first. My husband mentioned it offhand one night, saying his mom had been planning flights. I laughed and asked, "Am I not family?" He fumbled with his phone, muttered something about forgetting, and then added me to the chat. The welcome was lukewarm. A thumbs-up emoji from my father-in-law, a beach gif from Sarah. Nothing from my mother-in-law. The messages in that chat were always oddly vague. "We'll confirm the dates soon. Still working on the villa details. Flights might be tight, we'll see." I tried to ask questions: what airline, what time, what room setup, but the responses were short, clipped. Eventually, I stopped pressing. I told myself they were just busy, not excluding me. But deep down, my gut was already whispering the truth. Packing became my way of silencing the doubt. I rolled towels with military precision, zipped compartments shut, and even packed snacks for the flight. Pretzels, granola bars, little packs of almonds. I pictured myself sharing them with Sarah and laughing over in-flight movies. It sounds foolish now, but hope has a way of painting over cracks until you are face to face with the wall. The night before the supposed departure, my husband told me to just meet them at his parents' place. "It'll be easier," he said. "That way we can all head to the airport together." Something about the way he avoided my eyes should have been a clue. Instead, I smiled, kissed his cheek, and said I'd be there. That morning, I woke up early. The sun had barely risen, but I was already in vacation mode. I slipped into shorts and a t-shirt, sprayed myself with a mist of coconut sunscreen, and checked my bag one last time. My heart buzzed with a nervous kind of energy, the kind you get before a test or a blind date. I wanted so badly for this to be the trip where I finally belonged. Driving over, I played cheerful music, the kind that makes you think of road trips and ice cream cones. The highway stretched ahead, golden with morning light. But the closer I got to their house, the heavier my stomach felt. My fingers tapped against the steering wheel, restless. I reminded myself of all the times I had been brushed aside before. Maybe this was the same. Maybe this was worse. The driveway was full when I arrived. Suitcases lined up neatly inside the hallway, like soldiers waiting for orders. Through the glass, I could see Sarah adjusting her sun hat, her husband Dan laughing at something on his phone. My father-in-law stood at the kitchen counter, stirring a pot that was clearly empty. They looked so ready, so coordinated, as if they had rehearsed this scene. That was when my mother-in-law opened the door. Her eyes flicked over me like I was a mistake on a grocery list. "You were never invited. We figured you'd be fine alone." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't even frown. She said it the way some people say the weather is hot, as if it were a fact, not a choice. My body reacted before my mind did. My shoulders locked, my chest tightened, but my face stayed still. I smiled. That's the thing about years of being underestimated. You learn how to make your mask look natural. I thought of the Christmas when she handed out gifts to everyone except me, then turned to say, "We didn't know what you'd like." I thought of the Thanksgiving. I cooked the entire meal, only for her to tell the table that store-bought tastes better. I thought of the family photo where she asked me to step aside so just the real family could be in the frame. All of it condensed into that one moment on the porch. The heat of the sun on my skin, the weight of the bag on my shoulder, the smell of fresh-cut grass from the neighbor's yard. My humiliation felt sharp enough to taste. I set the bag down quietly on the porch, my phone buzzing in my pocket like a reminder that I still had choices. Inside, they were laughing, the sound muffled through the walls but cutting straight through me. I turned, walked back to my car, and slid into the driver's seat. The air inside was cooler, calmer. I stared at the steering wheel, my hands shaking slightly. I could have driven straight home. I could have called a friend, vented, cried, drowned the weekend in ice cream and self-pity, but something inside me refused. I thought about how they had carefully left me out of every step. The vague group messages, the silence whenever I asked for details, the way no one had bothered to check if I had a ticket or not. They wanted me excluded. They thought they had erased me. That was the moment I opened the airline app. My fingers moved on instinct. Flight numbers, times, available seats. I recognized the exact flight. They hadn't even bothered to hide it. The gate, the departure, the villa they had chosen. All of it was right there, waiting for me to see. I booked a seat. Not just any seat. A good one. And then I searched for something better than their villa. Something with a view. Something with space. Something that screamed independence. When I found the private resort suite, oceanfront with a balcony, I felt the corners of my mouth curl. Reservation name, Miller. Their last name, not mine. A tiny rebellion, typed into a booking form. I added a note. Early check-in, champagne on arrival. My thumb hovered for a second, then tapped confirm. The confirmation email slid into my inbox with a cheerful chime. I leaned back, exhaling. My humiliation was still raw, but under it I felt a spark. Control, agency. Something they had tried to strip away from me but couldn't. The house behind me buzzed with their excitement. I could hear suitcases thumping, Sarah's laugh cutting through the air, my mother-in-law's clipped voice giving instructions. None of it mattered anymore. I wasn't begging for a seat at their table. I was building my own. I turned the key in the ignition. The car rumbled awake, the air vents blowing cool against my heated skin. I adjusted the mirror one last time, catching a glimpse of the house shrinking behind me. Then I drove away, sunlight flashing across the windshield. I whispered it again, soft but certain. Have a good trip. And this time, the words didn't sting. Because I knew mine would be better. Driving away from that house, I couldn't help but replay every moment that had led up to this. That single sentence, "You were never invited," wasn't born in a vacuum. It was the crescendo of years of being pushed aside, erased, and treated like a placeholder in my own marriage. The first time I noticed it was subtle. It was at our wedding rehearsal dinner. I had chosen the restaurant carefully, a small Italian place with candlelight and fresh bread baskets that never seemed to empty. I thought it would be intimate, warm, something to remind us of why we were all there. My mother-in-law, however, announced halfway through the meal that the real celebration would be at her house the next day. She told the table, "This is nice, but tomorrow we'll do it properly." The word properly sat in my chest like a stone. My friends and family smiled politely, but I could feel my cheeks burning. The implication was clear. My effort didn't count. Then came the holidays. The first Christmas after our wedding, I wrapped gifts for everyone, carefully picking things I thought they'd appreciate. A cookbook for my father-in-law, who claimed he wanted to learn new recipes. A silk scarf for my sister-in-law. A framed picture of our wedding for my mother-in-law. She opened it, looked at the frame, then set it aside without a word. Hours later, I watched as she handed that same frame to Sarah, saying, "Maybe you'll want this for your place." My smile stayed glued in place, but inside I felt something crack. There were birthdays, too. One year, I baked a cake for my husband, spending the entire afternoon in the kitchen while they sat in the living room. When I brought it out, proud of my work, she tilted her head and said, "Oh, you didn't need to go through all that trouble. We usually just buy one from the bakery. Tastes better." The knife in my hand hovered over the cake. My lips curved into a practiced smile, but my chest hollowed out. It wasn't just words. It was actions, little slights that added up. Family photos where she would ask me to stand on the side, then later crop me out when she posted them online. Dinners where she poured wine for everyone except me, until I had to reach for the bottle myself. Vacations where my name was mysteriously missing from the booking list, only to be added as an afterthought once I pressed. My husband tried to soften the edges. He would tell me, "She doesn't mean it that way," or, "You know how she is." But every dismissal only deepened the cut. Because even if she didn't mean it, the effect was the same. I was being erased, one small act at a time. I thought of the Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I had volunteered to cook because I wanted to contribute, to show that I belonged. I spent hours brining the turkey, mashing potatoes, whisking gravy until it was smooth and rich. When I set the table, everything looked perfect. At dinner, she took one bite, dabbed her lips with a napkin, and said, "Store, bought tastes better." The table chuckled politely, as if she had made a clever joke. I laughed too, but inside I felt like she had slapped me in front of everyone. There was the summer barbecue when I wore a new dress, bright and floral, something I had splurged on after months of saving. She looked me up and down and said, "Oh, Sarah has one just like that, but hers is real silk." I smiled, pretended not to care, but later that night, I folded the dress into the back of my closet and never wore it again. Even my small victories were twisted. When I got a promotion at work, I shared the news over dinner, excited, proud. She nodded and said, "Well, good thing you have a job. Sarah has been so stressed lately, balancing her art with everything else." The conversation pivoted instantly to Sarah, and my accomplishment dissolved into the background like mist. The worst part wasn't the comments or the exclusions. It was the way everyone else played along. My father-in-law turning away, pretending to be busy. Sarah smirking quietly, never speaking up. My husband staying silent, insisting afterward that it wasn't worth making a scene. It made me feel like I was the only one who saw the cracks, the only one standing outside the circle. So when she told me, "You were never invited," it wasn't just about a vacation. It was about years of being told I wasn't really part of them. Years of swallowing insults disguised as jokes. Years of holding my tongue to keep the peace. That moment on the porch was simply the first time she had said out loud what she had been acting out all along. The memories flickered through my mind as I drove, each one a match tossed into the pile of resentment I had tried so hard to keep damp. The rehearsal dinner, the Christmas frame, the birthday cake, the cropped photos, the Thanksgiving meal, the promotion that became Sarah's spotlight. Each insult layered over the last until they formed a mountain, and the truth was, I had always let it slide. I had smiled, nodded, laughed politely, gone back to my corner. I thought endurance meant strength. I thought silence meant grace. But now, with the taste of her words still sharp in my mouth, I realized endurance had only given her permission. My silence had been her green light. The difference this time was choice. For the first time, I had taken the steering wheel of my own story. I booked the flight. I chose the suite. I signed their last name to a reservation that would eventually force her to see me, not as someone waiting to be included, but as someone who had carved out her own space. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming all the little pieces of myself she had chipped away. Every memory that had haunted me turned into fuel. By the time I reached the highway, the humiliation had cooled into something steadier, a quiet determination. As the sun dipped lower and the sky blushed pink, I whispered to the empty car, "Never invited?" Maybe, but never invisible. The airport smelled like coffee and disinfectant, the kind of scent that clings to early flights and restless travelers. I wheeled my bag across the shiny floor, the sound of the wheels clicking over tile echoing louder than my footsteps. My ticket was folded neatly in my pocket, confirmation email glowing in my phone like a secret only I knew. I spotted them before they spotted me. My mother-in-law at the check-in counter, her coral lipstick perfectly intact even at 6 in the morning. Sarah stood next to her, scrolling through her phone with one hand and holding her husband's arm with the other. My father-in-law was fussing with luggage tags, his shoulders hunched, eyes darting everywhere but at me. I slowed my pace, letting the scene unfold like a movie I had seen too many times. They were in their own world, laughing, chatting, pretending everything was normal, the kind of normal that never included me. Then my mother-in-law turned. Her eyes landed on me. For a second, just one fleeting second, her face slipped. Shock flickered there before she pulled it back into her usual mask of calm control. "Oh," she said, as if I were an unexpected inconvenience, like a rain cloud over a picnic. "You're here." "Yes," I said simply. My voice was steady, my smile polite. Inside, my chest thudded like a drum, but I let none of it show. Sarah tilted her head, her lips curling into a smirk. "Did you get a ticket last minute?" she asked, voice syrupy sweet. I pulled my boarding pass from my pocket and held it up. "Same flight," I said. Funny how that worked out. The silence that followed was thick, punctured only by the announcements crackling through the intercom. Boarding groups, gate changes, the low hum of travelers moving past us. My mother-in-law pressed her lips together, then gave a sharp nod, as if trying to reassert control of a story she thought she had already finished writing. On the plane, I sat 3 rows behind them. I could see the back of her head, perfectly styled curls bobbing as she leaned toward Sarah. I couldn't hear her words, but I could guess. Speculation. Disbelief. Plans to minimize me once again. I leaned back in my seat, slid on my headphones, and closed my eyes. Hours later, the plane descended into paradise. Palm trees swayed just outside the airport windows, and the air smelled thick with salt and humidity. Tourists buzzed around in flip-flops, dragging brightly colored suitcases. My family walked ahead, their matching sun hats bobbing like markers in a crowd. I followed at a distance, not hiding, just waiting. At the resort check-in, I watched from the corner of the lobby as they approached the desk. My mother-in-law handed over her reservation. The clerk typed quickly, nodded, and smiled. Keys were prepared, folders slid across the polished counter. Sarah laughed about something. Her husband draped an arm around her shoulders. My father-in-law adjusted his sunglasses on top of his head. Then it was my turn. I stepped forward, handed over my ID, and said, "Reservation for Miller, suite with the ocean view." The clerk looked up, eyebrows lifting slightly. "Yes, Mrs. Miller. Early check-in, champagne on arrival." He smiled, pulling out a different folder, sliding across a keycard embossed with the resort's golden logo. Behind me, I felt it. The silence. Heavy. Burning. I turned just enough to catch my mother-in-law's expression. Her lips parted, her face pale beneath the coral lipstick. Sarah froze mid-laugh, the sound dying in her throat. My father-in-law's sunglasses slipped down his forehead as he blinked. I smiled, soft and sharp. "I'll see you around," I said, slipping the keycard into my pocket. The clerk gestured to a bellhop, who whisked my bag onto a cart. I followed him across the marble floor, the wheels humming smoothly. I didn't look back, but I could feel their eyes drilling into my back. The suite was everything I had imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows that opened to the sea, waves crashing in rhythm against the shore. The air smelled of salt and fresh linen. A bottle of champagne waited on the table, condensation beating against the glass like jewels. I opened the balcony doors and stepped outside. The sun was high, the ocean glittering like a sheet of diamonds. I leaned against the railing, let the breeze tangle my hair, and laughed softly. It wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel, just quiet. The kind of laugh you make when the world finally tilts in your favor, even for a moment. Later that evening, I wandered back through the lobby. They were at the front desk again, voices raised this time. Something about double bookings, confusion, a note in the system. The clerk was apologetic, but firm. I passed by, invisible and undeniable at the same time. My mother-in-law turned sharply, eyes locking on me. "What did you do?" she hissed under her breath as I walked past. I paused, tilted my head, and smiled. "Booked my own trip," I said. "Like you wanted." Her face flushed, a mix of fury and something else. Maybe recognition, maybe fear. Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but closed it again. My father-in-law stared at the ground. I didn't wait for more. I walked out to the terrace, the sound of the ocean wrapping around me. For once, I wasn't the one excluded. They were, and they had done it to themselves. The night fell soft over the island, the air heavy with the scent of hibiscus and salt. I sipped champagne from a glass that caught the moonlight, my phone buzzing on the table with missed calls. I let it buzz, because this was my trip now. Mine. The first night in Hawaii, I barely slept. Not because I was anxious, but because I felt a strange, almost electric calm running through me. The ocean whispered against the shore, the waves rising and falling like a steady drum. My suite smelled of champagne and salt air. I stood at the balcony, watching the moonlight trail silver across the water, and thought about how easily everything had shifted. For years, I had been the one left behind. Now, I was the one choosing where to stand. The next morning, I dressed slowly. A linen dress, sandals that clicked softly against the marble floor, hair pulled back so the breeze could touch the back of my neck. I didn't rush. I let time stretch out. By the time I reached the breakfast terrace, the sun was already spilling gold across the horizon, and there they were. My family. Or at least the people who had always reminded me I wasn't part of theirs. They sat at a long table, plates stacked with fruit, coffee cups steaming. My mother-in-law's laugh carried across the terrace, loud and sharp, like glass shattering. I asked for a table near the railing, ocean view. A little distance away, but close enough that my presence couldn't be ignored. The server brought fresh juice and a plate of tropical fruit. I took a slow sip, let the sweetness coat my tongue, and opened a book I had brought. I wasn't really reading. My eyes flicked over the pages, but my ears were tuned to every sound from their table. It didn't take long. My mother-in-law's voice dropped low, sharp with irritation. I don't understand how this happened. The sweet, the note about champagne, that was supposed to be ours. Sarah whispered back, not as quietly as she thought. It's like she's mocking you. I turned a page in my book, let a smile tug at my lips. Later that afternoon, I headed down to the pool. The sun was warm, the water glittered like liquid glass. I stretched out on a lounge chair, ordered a cocktail, and slipped on sunglasses. A moment later, shadows fell across me. I lifted the glasses just enough to see them. My mother-in-law, standing with arms crossed, Sarah at her side, her husband trailing behind like a reluctant accessory. You booked that suite under our name, she hissed, her voice low but venomous. I set the glasses on the table, sat up slowly. I booked my suite. It just happens to have your name. Miller. Common name, isn't it? Her cheeks flushed. You're trying to embarrass me. I tilted my head. Embarrass you? You told me I wasn't invited. I believed you. So I made my own plans. That's all. For once, she had no immediate comeback. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the other guests lounging nearby who were pretending not to listen. My father-in-law muttered something about getting a drink and walked away. I leaned back, picked up my cocktail, and added, Enjoy your vacation. I know I will. They left, stiff and silent, their footsteps sharp against the stone. I watched them go, the ice in my glass clinking softly as I swirled it. That evening, the hotel hosted a luau. Guests gathered on the lawn, torches flickering against the twilight, the air rich with the smell of roasted pork and tropical flowers. I wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, but it didn't matter. As I joined the crowd, people greeted me, staff nodded warmly. My family sat at another table, their expressions tight, their voices muted. Halfway through the evening, the host made an announcement about special guests staying in the oceanfront suite. A spotlight swept briefly across the lawn, landing on me. Applause rippled through the crowd. I raised my glass politely, smiled, then set it back down. My mother-in-law's face, in that moment, was unforgettable, pale, tight. Her lips pressed into a line so thin it could have been carved from stone. Sarah whispered something to her, but she didn't respond. I let the applause fade, then turned my attention back to the performers. Dancers moved gracefully, fire twirled in the night air. It wasn't about me, not really. But for once, I wasn't invisible. And she couldn't stand it. The next morning, I passed her in the lobby. She stopped me, her voice low and brittle. You think you've won something, don't you? I met her gaze, steady. I didn't win. I just stopped losing. Her mouth opened, then closed again. No words came out. She turned sharply and walked away, her heels clicking like a gavel slamming down. I watched her go, a strange mix of sorrow and satisfaction twisting inside me. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't begged. I hadn't fought for scraps of acknowledgement. I had simply chosen differently. That, more than anything, was the retaliation. Later, when I returned to my suite, I found another bottle of champagne waiting, this one sent from the hotel staff with a note. For Mrs. Miller, enjoy your stay. I laughed, set the bottle on the table, and poured myself a glass. The bubbles tickled my nose as I raised it to the balcony, the ocean stretching endless before me. Behind me, my phone buzzed with messages. Missed calls, voicemails. I let it buzz. The waves were louder, steadier, truer. In that moment, I realized something. Retaliation wasn't about humiliating her. It wasn't about making her feel the sting I had carried for years. It was about reclaiming the space she had tried to erase me from. It was about saying, without shouting, that I existed, that I belonged, even if not with them. I sipped the champagne, let the breeze tangle my hair, and whispered to myself, cheers. The last day of the trip arrived faster than I expected. Hawaii has a way of folding time. Mornings blurred into evenings. Waves erased hours like chalk lines on a wet sidewalk. My suitcase sat open in the corner of the suite, half-packed, clothes folded neatly beside the unopened second bottle of champagne. I stood by the balcony again, looking at the water, and wondered if I had changed, or if I had simply remembered who I was. Down below, I could see them. My mother-in-law, Sarah, her husband, my father-in-law. They sat stiffly by the pool, sunglasses covering expressions that I already knew by heart. Their laughter was quieter now, clipped at the edges. I noticed the way Sarah kept checking her phone. My mother-in-law's posture was rigid, as if the entire trip had been a performance that no one applauded. I took my time walking down to the lobby. My sandals clicked against the polished marble floor. The staff greeted me warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller," one said, smiling as if the title fit me perfectly. I smiled back, not bothering to correct him. When I stepped outside, they noticed me. My mother-in-law's face tightened immediately, as though my presence had stolen oxygen from the air. Sarah gave me a quick glance, then looked away. My father-in-law pretended to adjust his hat. I walked past them, calm, unhurried. I felt their eyes follow me. Not one word was spoken, not one greeting offered, but the silence was louder than any insult. It told me everything I needed to know. Later that day, as I checked out, the receptionist handed me the final invoice. The folder bore their last name in bold letters. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller," he said again. I slipped the keycard inside, smiled, and replied, "It was perfect." I could almost feel her burning from across the lobby. My mother-in-law, watching as the staff treated me as if I belonged more than she did. For once, I didn't have to fight for acknowledgement. It was handed to me, wrapped in politeness and golden lettering. The ride to the airport was quiet. Palm trees blurred past the windows, the sun dipping lower, painting the sky in soft streaks of orange and pink. I thought about the first day, standing on that porch, hearing those words. You were never invited. The humiliation had been sharp, unbearable. Now it felt distant, almost laughable, because the truth was, I hadn't just been invited. I had been the main character of my own trip. At the airport, our paths crossed again. Fate has a cruel sense of humor. We ended up at the same gate, waiting for the same flight home. She sat 3 rows down from me. Her coral lipstick faded, her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Sarah leaned against her husband, scrolling her phone, avoiding eye contact. My father-in-law sipped coffee like it could shield him. I sat upright, book in hand, pretending to read, but really just listening to the announcements and the low hum of voices around us. When the boarding call came, I stood up. She looked at me then, directly. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something. Maybe an insult, maybe a warning, maybe, though I doubt it, an apology. But nothing came out. She closed her mouth, turned away, and gathered her things. On the plane, I sat several rows ahead of them this time. I leaned against the window, watched the island shrink into the ocean, and thought about endings. Some stories close with apologies, reconciliations, warm embraces. Mine didn't. Mine closed with silence. And maybe that was better. Because silence is a strange kind of truth. It means there is nothing left to argue, nothing left to disguise. It means she knew, even if she never admitted it, that her words had backfired, that her attempt to erase me had only drawn me in sharper outline. When we landed, we walked through the terminal together but apart. They were just ahead, dragging their suitcases, whispering in tight voices. I stayed a few steps behind, calm, steady, almost amused. At baggage claim, our eyes met one last time. Her stare was brittle, sharp, searching for some reaction in me. I offered none. Just a small, measured smile. My suitcase slid onto the carousel, and I pulled it off with ease. I walked past them without a word, the wheels rolling smoothly against the tile. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A friend had texted, asking how the trip went. I typed back, "Unforgettable," and slipped the phone away. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I inhaled deeply. The city smelled different after Hawaii. Sharper. Less forgiving, but I felt lighter than I had in years. I don't know if she realized what she lost that day. Maybe she thought it was just a sweet, just a trip, just another attempt to control me, but it was more than that. It was the moment I stopped standing at her door, waiting to be let in. It was the moment I realized I never needed her invitation. The taxi door closed behind me. The city lights flickered on in the distance. I whispered to myself, just loud enough for the night to hear. I was always invited. To my own life. And I meant it.